Feynman was asked once near the end of his life whether he was afraid of death. He said no, not because he had made peace with it in the way a philosopher makes peace with an uncomfortable idea, not because he had found religion or consolation or a story that made it bearable. He said no because when he looked at the question from the perspective of physics, from the perspective of what the universe actually is and how it actually works, the question turned out to be different from the question he had been asked. He was not being evasive, he was being precise. And the precision, when you follow it, leads somewhere that the standard conversation about death never goes. Here is what you have been told. You are a thing, a body, a mind, a self. You were born on a particular date. You will die on another particular date. Between those two dates you exist. Before and after you do not. Death is the end of you. It is the transition from existing to not existing. It is final, it is total, and it is coming. That picture is not wrong in the way that most wrong pictures are wrong. It is not missing a detail or mischaracterizing a mechanism. It is wrong at the level of what the word you refers to. It assumes that you are a thing, a localized, bounded, persistent object in the universe. And physics, when you press it on this question, says that is not what you are, not even approximately. What you actually are is stranger, more durable in some ways, more distributed, more continuous with everything around you than the everyday picture of a self suggests. And the physics of what you actually are is what Feynman was pointing at when he said he was not afraid. Pull on this thread. Everything you think you know about where you end and the universe begins is about to change. Let me start with the most basic version of the problem. The atoms in your body are not yours, they never were. The carbon in your cells was forged in the cores of stars that died before the solar system existed. The hydrogen in your water molecules has been hydrogen since 3 minutes after the Big Bang. The calcium in your bones was assembled in a supernova explosion. Every atom in you has been part of other things, other organisms, other planets, other stars. For the entire history of the universe, they were not waiting for you. They passed through you, and most of them will pass through other things after you. The turnover is faster than most people know. The lining of your stomach replaces itself every 5 days. Your red blood cells are replaced every 4 months. The cells in your liver turn over every few years. Even your skeleton, which feels like the most permanent part of you, is continuously remodeled. The calcium and phosphate are constantly exchanged with your bloodstream. The bone you have now is not the bone you had 10 years ago. Most of the atoms that constituted you a decade ago are no longer in you. They are in the soil, in the ocean, in the atmosphere, in other organisms. So here is the first crack in the standard picture. The atoms that make up your body are not the thing that makes you you. They cannot be, because they keep changing. If you were your atoms, you would be a different person every few years. You are not a different person every few years. Something persists, but it is not the atoms. What persists is a pattern, an arrangement, a specific and extraordinarily complex way of organizing matter and energy that processes information, maintains itself against the tendency toward disorder, responds to its environment, and generates the continuous experience you call your life. The pattern is what you are. The atoms are just a current medium in which the pattern is instantiated. And here is where physics enters. Because once you accept that you are a pattern rather than a collection of atoms, the question of what happens when you die changes completely. Death is not the end of the atoms. They persist and recombine. Death is the end of this particular pattern, the dissolution of this specific arrangement. The question is what that means physically for the information that constituted the pattern. And physics has things to say about that. Physics is built on conservation laws. Energy is conserved. It cannot be created or destroyed, only converted from one form to another. Momentum is conserved. Angular momentum is conserved. Electric charge is conserved. In quantum mechanics, the total probability described by the wave function is conserved. And most fundamentally, by a deep theorem, due to Emmy Noether, every conservation law corresponds to a symmetry of the laws of physics, a way of transforming the system that leaves the physics unchanged. These conservation laws are not engineering approximations. They are exact. They hold in every physical process ever observed, to every decimal place of precision ever measured. They are the most reliable facts in all of science. Now, what does conservation of energy mean for you? Your body right now contains a specific amount of chemical energy stored in molecular bonds, kinetic energy of molecular motion, electrical energy and ion gradients across cell membranes, and a very large amount of rest mass energy, the energy equivalent of your mass, given by EE squared. None of that energy goes anywhere when you die. It cannot. The first law of thermodynamics is absolute. Every joule that constitutes you now will constitute something else later. The energy does not end, it transforms. The carbon in your cells will eventually become carbon dioxide, breathed out by the organisms that decompose you, taken up by plants, incorporated into new organisms. The heat released by decomposition will warm the surrounding environment and radiate as infrared into space. The electrical patterns in your nervous system will dissipate, but the energy they carried will become thermal energy, and that energy will persist flowing through the thermodynamic systems of the planet, and eventually the cosmos, for as long as the universe exists. You cannot die in the sense of ceasing to be part of the energy budget of the universe. That budget is closed. You are in it permanently. Conservation of energy is the easy part. The deeper question is about information, and here the physics is more contested, more recent, and considerably more disturbing. In quantum mechanics, the evolution of a physical system is described by the Schrödinger equation. This equation is unitary, a technical term meaning that it preserves the total probability, and more importantly, that it is reversible. Given the state of a quantum system at any moment, the Schrödinger equation allows you to calculate the state at any other moment, past or future. No information is lost. The evolution is perfectly deterministic in both temporal directions. Unitarity is not a minor feature of quantum mechanics. It is foundational. It is what makes quantum mechanics a consistent theory. If unitarity is violated, if information is genuinely destroyed, quantum mechanics breaks down. The probabilities stop adding to 1. The theory becomes inconsistent. The implication of unitarity is stark. Every physical process that has ever occurred has left a complete record in the state of the universe. The information about every configuration of every particle is encoded, in principle, in the current state of the universe. It has been scrambled, spread across an enormously large number of degrees of freedom, entangled with the environment, impossible to recover in practice, but it has not been destroyed. It is still there, in the correlations and entanglements of the quantum state of everything. Let me say that again with the full weight it deserves. The information that constitutes you, the precise quantum state of every particle in your body, every neural connection, every memory encoded in synaptic weights, every aspect of the pattern that you call yourself, is, according to quantum mechanics, never destroyed. It is scrambled beyond any practical possibility of recovery, but scrambled is not erased. The information is still there, distributed across the quantum state of the universe, conserved by the unitarity of quantum mechanical evolution. This is not philosophy. This is the Schrödinger equation applied to the universe as a whole, taken seriously. Feynman took it seriously. He spent his career building the most precise version of quantum mechanics that exists, quantum electrodynamics, and he was unequivocal that unitarity holds. Information is not destroyed. The universe does not forget. Feynman's personal position on death was articulated in several contexts, most clearly in interviews toward the end of his life when he was already ill with the kidney cancer that would kill him in 1988 at the age of 69. He said that when he looked at the question of his own death, what he found was not terror and not consolation, but curiosity. He said that the atoms that made up Richard Feynman had been many other things before they were Richard Feynman, and would be many other things after. He said that the particular pattern, the way the atoms were arranged, the information encoded in the configuration, was something genuinely novel and genuinely valuable, and he regretted that it would end. But he said that regretting it did not require being afraid of it, and that the universe's indifference to that loss was not cruelty. It was just physics. He also said something that I want to be careful about, because it is easy to misread it as more comforting than he intended. He said that the atoms in his body would go on, and that was something. He was not saying that he would go on. He was precise about that. He was not arguing for any form of personal immortality. He was pointing at the continuity of matter and energy, and suggesting that being part of that continuity, even after the pattern dissolved, was not nothing. What Feynman was pointing at, I think, is this. The fear of death is largely a fear about the self, about the termination of this particular first-person perspective, this particular continuous experience. And the physics suggests that the boundaries of that self are less sharp, less fixed, less real than the fear assumes. You are not a closed system. You have never been a closed system. The matter flows through you. The information in you is entangled with the information in everything around you. The boundary between you and the universe has always been a useful fiction, a practical approximation, not a physical fact. Dissolving that fiction does not make death less real, but it changes what death is the end of. It is the end of the pattern, yes. It is not the end of the matter. It is not the end of the energy. And quantum mechanics suggests it is not the end of the information, only the end of the information being localized in this particular arrangement. The scrambling is total. The erasure is not. There is one more piece of physics that bears on this question, and it is the one that Feynman's colleague John Wheeler found most significant. It comes from special relativity and what physicists call the block universe interpretation of space-time. In special relativity, time is a dimension of space-time, not a flow. The past, the present, and the future all exist with equal ontological status in the four-dimensional space-time manifold. The distinction between past and future is observer-dependent, a consequence of the thermodynamic arrow of time, as we explored in the entropy video. But the events themselves are as real as spatial locations. An event that happened in the past has not ceased to exist. It is located at a particular set of space-time coordinates. It is there, permanently. What this means for you is the following. Every moment you have ever experienced is a real event in space-time. It happened. It is located in the four-dimensional structure of the universe. It will always have happened. The block universe does not delete the past as time moves forward. It accumulates it. Every moment of your life, every experience, every thought, every sensation is permanently inscribed in the geometry of space-time. You cannot go back to it. You cannot access it. From within the flow of time as you experience it, the past is inaccessible. But inaccessible is not the same as non-existent. In the block universe, every moment of your life is real for as long as the universe exists. The you of 20 years ago is there, at those space-time coordinates, as real as the you reading this now. Feynman was characteristically cautious about over-interpreting the block universe. He was not a fan of philosophical extrapolations from physics that outran the physics. But he took seriously the implication that time is not what it looks like from inside the experience of it, that the flow of time is a feature of our thermodynamic situation, not a feature of the underlying geometry, and that the underlying geometry is more permanent, more complete than the flow suggests. Let me state what the physics actually says. The atoms in you cannot die. They predate you by billions of years and will outlast you by billions more. The energy in you cannot die. Conservation of energy is absolute. The information in you, according to the unitarity of quantum mechanics, cannot be destroyed. It will be scrambled beyond recovery, distributed across the quantum state of an entire universe. But scrambled is not erased. The universe does not forget, and every moment you have ever lived is a permanent feature of space-time. The block universe does not delete the past. It is all there, fixed in the four-dimensional geometry, as real as the present moment. What dies is the pattern, the specific arrangement of matter and energy and information that constitutes this particular person, this particular first-person perspective, this particular continuous experience. That pattern will not persist. Feynman did not pretend otherwise, and neither will this video. The pattern ends. That is real, and it matters. But here's what the physics says about what the pattern is. It is not a thing that was ever truly separate from the universe around it. It has always been an open system, exchanging matter and energy continuously with everything else. The boundary between you and the world has always been a metabolic boundary, a dynamic process of selective exchange, not a wall. The atoms that were you last year are in the soil, the ocean, the bodies of other organisms. The atoms that will be you next year are currently in your food. You are a whirlpool in a river, not a stone in the riverbed. The water that constitutes the whirlpool is always changing. The whirlpool is real, but it was never the water. You cannot die in the sense of ceasing to be part of the universe. You are part of the universe permanently. What changes is the form of that participation. What ends is the localized, bounded, self-aware form of that participation. That ending is real. The physics does not soften it. What the physics does is locate it correctly as a change in pattern, not an exit from existence. The question of whether information is truly conserved in the universe is not settled. And the argument about it is one of the most significant intellectual conflicts in the history of physics, precisely because the stakes are as high as they get. Stephen Hawking showed in 1974 that black holes are not truly black. They emit radiation, now called Hawking radiation, as a quantum mechanical effect at the event horizon. Over time, a black hole emits this radiation, loses mass, and eventually evaporates completely. The radiation is thermal, it has a temperature, it has a spectrum, but it contains no information about what fell into the black hole. A black hole that formed from a collapsing star and a black hole that formed from an equivalent mass of chairs would emit identical Hawking radiation. All the information about what formed them is, apparently, gone. Feynman and every physicist who took quantum mechanics seriously said this was impossible. Unitarity cannot be violated. Information cannot be destroyed. If Hawking radiation is truly thermal and contains no information, then quantum mechanics is wrong. The two most successful theories in physics, quantum mechanics and general relativity, were directly contradicting each other on the question of whether the universe forgets. This conflict, the black hole information paradox, occupied the best minds in theoretical physics for 30 years. Hawking himself eventually conceded. In 2004, that information is preserved and escapes in subtle correlations in the Hawking radiation. The mechanism by which this happens, how information about the interior of a black hole gets encoded in the radiation it emits, remains an open research problem. But the conclusion that information is preserved, that the universe does not destroy what falls into a black hole, is now the consensus position. Unitarity holds. The universe does not forget. This matters for our question. The most extreme physical process in the universe, the complete evaporation of a black hole, does not destroy information. It scrambles it into the radiation. Whatever fell in is still there, in principle, in the correlations of the outgoing photons. If a black hole cannot destroy information, nothing can. The conservation of information is as fundamental as the conservation of energy. And the information that constitutes you is subject to both. The popular version of the stardust argument, you are made of stardust, your atoms will return to the cosmos, you are part of something vast and beautiful, is true, but it is usually stated at a level of vagueness that lets it pass through the mind without really landing. Let me state it at the level that Feynman would have found satisfying. The carbon atoms in your body were synthesized in the triple alpha process inside stars, with masses roughly 8 times the mass of the sun. When those stars exhausted their fuel, they collapsed and exploded as supernovae, scattering the carbon across the interstellar medium. That carbon eventually condensed into the molecular cloud that became the solar nebula, which became the sun, and the planets, which became the Earth, which produced the chemistry that produced life, which produced the organisms, whose decomposed matter became the soil, which became the food, which became you. The journey of a single carbon atom from stellar core to the cell on your finger took roughly 10 billion years. That atom was in a star. It was in the interstellar medium. It was in the ocean. It was in a dinosaur. It was in a soil. It was in a plant. It was in dozens of other humans before you. It is in you now. After you, it will be somewhere else. The sequence has no beginning and the end. For practical purposes, is the heat death of the universe. 10 to the power of 100 years from now, when even the protons will have decayed and the atoms themselves will no longer exist in their current form. You are not visiting the universe. You are the universe, temporarily organized into a configuration that is aware of itself. The self-awareness is new. The matter is ancient. The energy has always been here. When the self-awareness ends, the matter and energy do not mourn it. They simply continue, in whatever form physics requires them to take next. Feynman's wife Aline died of tuberculosis in 1945 while he was working on the Manhattan Project. He was 27. He adored her. He wrote her a letter a year and a half after she died and sealed it. It was found with his possessions after his own death in 1988. It ends, "Please excuse my not mailing this, but I don't know your new address." I am not going to extract a physics lesson from that letter. Some things do not require physics, but I will say that Feynman, the man who looked at every question through the lens of what the universe actually is, who spent his career insisting on honesty above comfort, who refused consolation when it was not earned, that man wrote that letter and kept it for 43 years. The physics does not replace grief. It does not make loss smaller. The end of a pattern is real, and the pattern was genuinely irreplaceable. There will not be another Arlene. There will not be another Feynman. There will not be another you. The universe does not produce duplicates. The specific configuration of matter and experience and memory that constitutes a person is historically unique. Its dissolution is a real loss. The physics does not pretend otherwise. What the physics does is reframe the question. The fear of death is usually a fear about the self ceasing to exist. Physics asks, what do you mean by exist, and what do you mean by self? When you press those questions with the full rigor of what we actually know about matter and energy and information in space-time, the answers are not what the fear assumes. The matter persists, the energy persists, the information, in the scrambled, distributed, practically unrecoverable but not erased sense, persists. Every moment you have experienced is a permanent feature of space-time. You have always been the universe arranged into a particular pattern, and the universe does not lose what it has been. It only changes form. Feynman was not offering comfort, he was being accurate. He said in one of his last interviews that he had had a good time, that he had found out a lot of things, that he was not afraid, because when he looked carefully at what he was afraid of, the thing he was afraid of turned out not to be quite what he thought it was. The atoms had been on a long journey before he got them, and they would be on a long journey after. The thoughts he had had, the physics he had worked out, those were real, and they had changed things, and you could not unchange them. The blocked universe does not revise its past. What he contributed is permanent, not in the sense that anyone will remember it forever. The universe will eventually reach a state in which nothing like memory is possible. But in the sense that it happened, and the block universe does not delete what happened, and the information is conserved, and the space-time coordinates at which Richard Feynman worked out quantum electrodynamics are real coordinates that will always have existed. That is not nothing. He thought it was not nothing. I think he was right. Here is the question I cannot resolve, and that I suspect Feynman could not resolve either, and that I want to leave with you. The physics says that information is conserved. The universe does not destroy what it has been. Every configuration of matter and energy that has ever existed is in some sense still present in the quantum state of the universe, scrambled, unrecoverable, but not erased. But the experience of being you, the first-person perspective, the sense of continuous awareness, the thing that makes the difference between your life being lived from the inside and merely being described from the outside, that is not obviously captured by conservation of information. Even if every fact about the configuration of your neurons is conserved in principle in some distributed quantum state, there is no mechanism by which that conservation produces experience. There is no physics of consciousness that tells us that conserved information feels like anything. This is the hard problem of consciousness, and it sits at the boundary of everything physics can tell us about death. Physics is clear about the matter and the energy and the information. Physics is silent about the experience. Whether the experience is something over and above the information, whether there is something it is like to be a pattern of matter that physics cannot capture, is the question that the conservation laws do not answer. Feynman was honest about this. He did not claim to know what consciousness is, or whether it survives in any form. He said that he did not know what happens after death in the experiential sense, and that he was suspicious of anyone who claimed to know. He said that the honest position was uncertainty, that the physics tells you things, and the things it tells you are genuinely interesting, but that it does not tell you everything, and that pretending it does is the same error as pretending the fear is simpler than it is. So, the matter persists. The energy persists, the information persists. The past is permanent in space-time, and whether any of that constitutes you persisting, whether the pattern that is you is something more than the matter, or whether the conservation of the information is the conservation of something that matters, is the question that physics opens and does not close. You cannot die in the sense of ceasing to be part of the universe. Whether you can die in the sense that matters most, the first-person sense, the sense of the light going out, is the question the physics leaves open. Where do you think the answer is?